So welcome back to Visual Theory 2, and today we're going to be looking at our nocturnal assignment. Full moon this coming Friday, so the timing of this is perfect for you to be able to get the images of the moon that are required as a part of this assignment. We'll be looking at some of the student work in just a minute, and the video just to give you background that you need to be able to complete the assignment. So this is our lesson plan for the day. Housekeeping, keep up the good work, responding to emails, and you can start checking grades. We're going to start grading your work and you'll be able to see where you're at. The objective of the day, introduce nocturnal photography and give instruction required to complete the nocturnal assignment 11/22/03. Full moon, don't miss it. If you miss the full moon, it's not going to come around and you will not meet the deadline on the assignment. So make sure that you clock when the full moon is. It's this Friday, 2 days time. Make sure that you're lined up for doing the assignment. So I'm going to go through these bullet points. First of all, nocturnal photography, shooting at night, a whole new world. I think it's really quite magical, the way that our digital cameras now can capture so much detail of the nighttime and the pictures that we see either of the city or of the desert or mountains with the moon and with stars in the background. It really gives a sense of our place within the universe. And I think such a magical thing. I think you could get really excited about doing this kind of work, and a lot of our students really get a kick out of doing the assignment. You're going to need a tripod. It's going to be impossible to do this assignment without a tripod. Everyone should have their own tripod at this stage, so it's a real necessary thing to be able to complete the assignment. There may be a couple of workarounds if you get really stuck. Sometimes photographers have used a beanbag on a solid surface to hold the camera steady and in place for doing long exposures. But really that's not an ideal for what we're doing. Shooting the moon and exposure compensation. Exposure compensation is something that we've spoken about a lot in the past, but the moon itself is very bright, and you're not going to need a long exposure to be able to get correct exposure. But if you're taking a evaluative or matrix light metering of the moon itself very bright, but the expanse of space is just an abyss of blackness. And so your light meter is looking at that and thinking, well, how do I represent this as 18% gray? What it wants to do is give you an exposure that will represent the dark blackness of space as 18% gray, which will be way overexposed. And so you're going to need to use exposure compensation, underexpose to bring the exposure right down to get detail in the moon. And that's what we want to see for this assignment, detail in the moon. If you were to use spot metering and meter on the moon itself, that's going to give you a much more accurate reading, but it may go the other way and give you an exposure that is too dark. So check your histogram on the back of the camera. Make sure that you're getting an exposure that is giving you detail in the moon. Another part of the assignment is a city scene, and if you're doing this, check that there's a central point of interest. Something in the foreground is probably going to be the ideal way to do that. But experiment with this and really using a longer exposure so that you get in the city car headlights streaming past. You'll see strips of white light coming through. That's what we want you to experiment with on this as well. Star trails, there's an extra video on how to do star trails, and this is an optional extra on your assignment. You'll see in the assignment sheet that we're calling for 12 images to be complete. 6 of those are city scene images. However, if you do the star trails, you can replace 3 of those city scene images with star trail images. JPEG or RAW? Well, RAW is going to be the recommendation. However, JPEG images are going to give you good results for this assignment as well. I would experiment with the white balance setting and set it to tungsten, certainly if you're photographing in the city or the nighttime sky with light pollution from a city, which is often very orange. And by using the white balance set to tungsten, you're going to end up with a much more of a blue haze in the sky, if you will, light pollution seen as blue rather than orange, which is not so attractive. We're looking at an example of that in just a moment. Editing. This assignment calls for a composite image with the moon. The assignment sheet, you've got it attached to your email. This is what we're looking at here. Nocturnal photography, moon and city scene. Image of the moon times 3. Nighttime of the city scene times 6. Composite images with the city scene and the moon combined, 3 of those. If you're doing the star trails images, you can replace 3 of your city scene images with the star trails. A couple of links on here, they're on the email as well. You're going to need your digital SLR kit and your tripod. Provide 12 images for grading, delivered to Blackboard. I just need the contact sheet and 1 image to Blackboard. And understanding of nocturnal photography, demonstration of technical skills, and creating a composite image of what we're looking at. All right, let's get back to looking at these images in Bridge. And this is previous student work. Larry Petrov did this image, some great images here. Here we can see the trails of the car headlights in the scene. Imagining what the photograph is going to look like with those trails of headlights is going to be an important part of the image. The fire hydrant in the foreground here is a great central point of interest. Here, the angel statue in the sky as a central point of interest, really nicely done. Neon lights, there's going to be so much kind of subject matter which is really going to be quite magical, and looking at the reflections of those as well. Think about editing, think about dodge and burn in some of these images. An image like this, I think, would lend itself to a little bit of dodge and burn. And here we are in Photoshop. I would use just a lasso tool. And I've got the feathering set to 200 here, but you know, I'm thinking, well, actually, I'd quite like this area to be lighter than this area here. So I'm going to the select, inverse. You see the marching ants go to the outside of the image. Curves is our go-to tool for adjusting these things. I'm going to bring down the background quite dramatically. Hit OK. And if I resave that image, we'll be able to see it side by side in Blackboard in just, not in Blackboard, in Bridge in just a minute. So this is the before, this is the after image. And so think about different things that you can do that might be able to improve in the editing of your images. There's some great examples here, but as I say, this kind of photography is really quite magical. Monochrome, doing a conversion into black and white, might lend some really interesting results as well. Star trails, there's a whole other video on the star trails if you choose to do that part of the assignment. Here I'm just going to adjust the contrast levels. That's going to bring up the detail in that image just a little bit more. Remember, lock in at the bottom, in the middle of the curve, excuse me, and I can bring down the darker areas here and raise up the lighter areas, and that's increased the contrast. In this image here, we can see the North Star right in the middle of the image, and that stays fixed in the night sky, and as the Earth rotates, the stars appear to be moving, but of course they're pretty much static. It's us that is moving, or rather that's the impact that it has on our photography. So the moon itself, we want to be able to see detail in the moon. This is a half moon. As I've said, and I'll keep saying it, Friday is our full moon, and I'd like you to shoot for the full moon. But if the weather is bad, there's a couple of days window either side where we'll be able to get other images in there as well. Camera shake and creative use of camera shake might be acceptable for some of the nighttime, some of the city scene images. So experiment with that a little bit. I don't mind you doing that. But for the moon itself, I want the moon to be crisp and sharp. And these two images here, one slightly brighter than the other. If I look at the metadata here, we can see that this is shot at 1/1000th of a second, f5.6 at ISO 100. You could increase the ISO, certainly 400, 800, and even 1600, but if you're going to use a longer exposure that you need to do for the city scene, you want to experiment with your ISO as well. This shot here, 1/500th of a second, is a little brighter, and that's probably where we need to be as well. A few more city scene images, just as an example. I was talking about the white balance, setting it to tungsten. And if I open this picture in Camera Raw, bear with me, let's shrink this down just a little bit so we can see. As shot, but if I adjust the color temperature here, if you shoot with your white balance set to tungsten, this is going to be much closer to the kind of result that you're going to see rather than the orange look. But of course it can be adjusted post-production in Camera Raw as well. Another shot of the moon there. Okay, composite image is the other part of the assignment. So I'm going to use two of these images to combine and create our composite image. I'm going to use this moon photograph here. So I've got both images open in Photoshop. I want to take out the moon from this shot and add it to the other. So I'm going to use the lasso tool here. I want a little bit of feathering, but not 200 pixels. I'm going to go down to 50 and make sure that I'm selecting an area that's kind of ragged edge around that image of the moon. I'm going to remove it down from the top bar there, go to the Move tool in my toolbar and click on this image again, and I can drag this across and it's going to appear in this image here. At the moment, much too big, but I'm going to go to Edit on drop down menu. You can't see it, but Free Transform you can see. Now you can see that I've linked in around here. I'm going to use the chain link so my aspect ratio is locked in. That's really important. And now I can shrink this image down. You know, it's having the moon big in the sky might look really, really dramatic, but it's going to look really artificial. And the way I'm going to do it here is try and do it so it looks somewhat realistic, like it could have actually been in the sky in the way that I've placed it. Offset here. Okay. At the moment, you can just about see that it's darker around here, and I want to be able to blend these two together. So I'm going to go into my layers palette, and on this top layer, add a layer mask, adjust my foreground background color and a brush. Remember, I can adjust the brush size by using my bracket keys, and here I can brush out the edge that I had. Remember, if you go too far with your brush, you can toggle backwards and forwards on the foreground background color and go back in and correct the image. You know, I think I'm going to move the position of that moon just a little bit more. I'm going to move tool again, and I can just move it around. Let's just put it in somewhere in here. Okay, I can flatten the image, layer and flatten. That's just slightly out, but that was on the drop down menus on the layer tab at the top, and it comes down right at the bottom. It allows you to do that. And so now if I look at my layers palette again, you can see there's just one layer as opposed to multiple. I could resave that as a color image. The moon was shot in black and white, and or the image that I've used here. So actually I'm going to do a conversion into black and white as well, and you may choose to do this with your images. I'm going to use the black and white tool, and remember I can use the color sliders to make an adjustment. I'm going quickly now. Slightly blue in here, clock that, orange in the background. So as I go to image adjustments, black and white, I can use the blue slider, and that will, or the cyans, and that's going to adjust the brightness of the blue areas. The red and the yellow will adjust how those other areas are looking. I can then save that, and we're good to go. All right, that's it. Plan for the day. and maybe go and shoot some in the daytime as a recce.